The late afternoon sun dipped over the Manhattan skyline, casting cold, indifferent shadows across the immense glass windows of the skyscraper on Park Avenue. Inside, the air conditioning maintained a glacial temperature, stark, violent contrast to the humid, suffocating heat that choked the city below. For Ethan Vance, the powerful magnet, this environment was his natural habitat, the polished marble echoing his expensive footsteps, the silence punctuated only by the low hum of servers, and the subtle scent of leather and success. It was the armor of his empire. He had just concluded a meeting that sealed a multi-million-dollar corporate chess game, one he had, as always, won decisively. His mind was still replaying the clauses, the numbers, the defeated expressions of his rivals. He felt invincible. It was precisely at this moment, as he strode across the opulent lobby toward the exit, that a voice stopped him. It wasn't the voice of an assistant or a partner. It was a small voice, barely a whisper, yet it possessed a firmness that cut through the air like a blade. Ethan paused, impatience already forming on his face. Standing before him was a little girl, a splash of vibrant color in his monochrome universe of gray and steel. She couldn't have been more than 7 years old. She wore a simple, bright green dress, and her coily hair was meticulously styled in braids that framed a serious, almost solemn face. She was a black child with large, dark eyes that gazed up at him with disconcerting intensity, eyes that seemed to carry a wisdom far beyond her years. For a moment, Ethan saw her as a dissonance, a piece that didn't belong in this landscape of power and wealth. What is a child like this doing here? He thought, a flicker of irritation crossing his mind. They said your car is going to explode, the girl whispered. The words hung in the chilled air between them. Ethan frowned, incredulity making him lean slightly toward her. He glanced over the girl's shoulder. A few yards away, 4 of his personal security detail burly men in dark suits were conversing in low voices. Their posture was relaxed, almost bored, the picture of normalcy, but the girl did not look away, and her conviction was so palpable that a shiver ran down Ethan's spine. A man who hadn't felt a shiver of fear in decades, a man who controlled everything. "What did you say?" he asked, his voice controlled, trying to mask the sudden, inexplicable disturbance. The little girl, whose name was Lena, clenched her tiny hands into fists by her sides. She wasn't intimidated. She repeated, this time with more clarity. "I heard what they said. They were speaking Chinese. They said your car will explode as soon as you turn the ignition. Don't get in your car, sir, please." The silence that followed was heavy, dense. Ethan heard a ringing in his ears. Chinese. He had learned the basics of Mandarin out of necessity. To navigate complex negotiations with his Asian partners, he knew enough to understand fragments, to grasp the essence of a conversation. But he could never have imagined that an unknown American child could not only understand, but decipher a conversation that would be a challenge even for him. He studied her, searching for any sign of a lie, a bad joke, but there was nothing. Her eyes showed no fear, only the urgency of one delivering a vital message. There was a quiet dignity in her that disarmed him. How do you know Chinese?" he asked, his voice now a conspiratorial murmur. "My grandma taught me," Lena replied without a hint of hesitation. "We watch movies together, and she teaches me the words." They spoke very fast, but I got the important parts. I understood car, boss, and explosion. And I heard them say they're waiting for the noise, that after that it will be chaos, and no one will ever suspect them. Ethan discreetly turned his head toward the guards. Their posture no longer seemed so relaxed. One of them was watching him sit along, and their conversation had ceased. They were now guarding the main door, but there was a new tension in their shoulders. Ethan's chest tightened, every fiber of his being, every instinct honed by years of double-dealing and betrayals in the business world, screamed an alert. He knew how to recognize a predator, and suddenly, he felt surrounded by them. "Kid," he began, his voice wavering for the first time in years, "are you absolutely sure about what you're saying? This is extremely serious." "I am," She stared at him intently, without blinking. Her eyes seemed to say, "I've seen serious things before. Believe me. Don't get into that car, sir, please." The air around them grew thin. Ethan swallowed hard, his mind racing, assessing scenarios, risks, probabilities. He paid a fortune for his security. These men were ex-military, the best on the market, trained to die for him, or so he thought. A warning from an unknown child against the sworn loyalty of his elite team. Logic demanded he ignore her instincts, scream to obey. He took a step back, creating a safe distance. And with the firm voice he used to command boardrooms, he called his personal assistant, who was waiting a respectful distance away. "Mark, get Mr. Harrison for me immediately." Only him. Mark, noting the unusual urgency in his boss's voice, hurried away. Ethan avoided looking directly at the four guards, but he felt the weight of their gazes, as if they knew their charade was about to be exposed. He leaned toward Lena again, the expensive scent of his cologne mixed with the simple, clean smell of her clothes. "Listen to me very carefully," he said, his voice low and grave. "If what you are telling me is true, you are also in great danger. They saw you talking to me. They won't let a witness expose them." Lena pressed her lips together, forming a thin, determined line. "I'm not scared. My grandma always told me that staying quiet in the face of something bad is the same as helping the evil happen. And seeing someone die is a very bad thing." Those simple words, of a devastating purity, hit him harder than any logical arguments from his lawyers or financial advisors. In that instant, Ethan felt the weight of his fortune, his billions, and his Italian suits crumble before the raw courage of a girl in a green dress. A girl who, in his society, was taught to be invisible, not to bother, not to be heard. And here she was, using her voice to save him. Mark returned with Mr. Harrison, an older man with grey hair and a face marked by time, the head of his personal security for over 20 years, and the only one Ethan truly trusted with his life. Ethan spoke into his ear in a low voice, never taking his eyes off the other four men. "Harrison, there's a bomb suspicion in my car. Check it now. Be discreet. Act like a routine inspection. Don't give them any reason to suspect." Harrison's face, usually impassive, twitched for a fraction of a second. He simply nodded and walked with calm steps toward the black armored sedan, waiting at the entrance. The other guards watched him, and the tension between them became a physical entity in the lobby. They exchanged clipped words in Chinese, and this time, Ethan felt a chill as he recognized the tone. It was contained panic. The magnate's heart hammered against his ribs. Everything seemed to happen in slow motion. The girl held onto the hem of his jacket with surprising strength, and for the first time in decades, since he was a young man struggling to build his first business, Ethan felt a primitive, visceral fear. It was then that one of the traitorous guards, a tall man with a square jaw, stepped forward, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mr. Vance, the car is ready. We should leave. The traffic is starting to worsen. It's not good to linger here." His voice was honeyed, but there was a note of steel beneath it. It was an order disguised as a suggestion. Ethan took a deep breath, the air seemingly not reaching his lungs. His gaze darted from the girl, who was now his only anchor of truth in that sea of lies, to the guards who were pressuring him to enter the deadly trap. And then, through the glass, near the car, he saw Harrison raise his hand and lightly draw his thumb across his own throat. It was an old signal between them, a maximum alert code he had never needed to use in 20 years. It meant, threat confirmed, lethal danger. The tension in the lobby snapped, unbearable. Ethan felt his throat close. The guards saw the sign and spun abruptly toward Harrison, desperate to intercept him or perhaps silence him. They wanted to block the view, to create confusion. Ethan understood immediately. The game was over, the air filled with a dangerous electricity. And as Lena looked up at him with wide eyes, fear now visible on her face, he realized there was no turning back. His life, which he considered an impenetrable fortress, depended on the courage of a girl whom society strove to make invisible. Harrison, sensing the movement, did not hesitate. He shouted, his professional voice echoing through the lobby and entrance. "Sir, do not approach. There is an explosive device connected to the ignition." The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the distant siren of an ambulance. The 4 guards froze. Their faces, once masks of professionalism, were now a mixture of fury and panic. One of them, the leader, turned to Ethan, still trying to maintain the facade. "It must be a mistake, boss. A false alarm. We reviewed the vehicle ourselves this morning." Ethan stared at him, and the coldness he used to destroy companies was now concentrated in his gaze. "Then explain to me, Miller, why Harrison, the only man on this team I trust with my life, is telling me otherwise." The traitor's facade crumbled. The man instinctively tried to reach for the holster under his jacket, a desperate move. "Don't even think about it," Ethan said, his voice as sharp as broken glass. "Your game ends here, right now." The building's internal security, alerted by the commotion and Harrison's shout, converged on the group. They were fast and efficient. In seconds, the 4 traitors were surrounded. There was a brief moment of resistance, insults in Chinese and English, looks of pure hatred directed at Ethan and, most especially, the small girl by his side. But they were overpowered, handcuffed, and dragged away. One of them, as he passed Ethan, spat on the floor and muttered in Chinese with the venom of defeat in his voice. Lena, still trembling but with the same firmness in her eyes, translated without being asked. He said it doesn't matter, that the order was placed and that sooner or later, someone will finish the job. Ethan looked at the girl with an admiration that bordered on reverence. Amid the chaos of betrayal, she remained his interpreter of truth. "Perhaps," he replied, his confidence returning, "but it won't be today. And it won't be as easy as you thought." He did not move until the traitors were out of sight. Only then, as the adrenaline began to subside, did he kneel, bringing himself to Lena's height. He ignored the curious glances, the murmurs of the employees, the entire world. In that moment, only he and the girl who had gifted him the future existed. "You saved my life," he said, his voice choked with an emotion he rarely allowed himself to feel. "I can never, in my whole life, thank you enough." Lena finally let the tension escape. A solitary tear traced a path down her face. I just repeated what I heard. My grandma says we have to look out for each other, that the color of our skin already makes many people want to harm us, so we have to be the good for each other." Her words struck him with the force of a revelation. He, Ethan Vance, who saw the world in terms of assets and liabilities, profits and losses, was receiving a lesson about humanity, loyalty, and courage from a child who understood solidarity and struggle in a way he, in his ivory tower, never could. He realized how blind he had been, how many Lenas he had ignored in his life, how many voices he had dismissed for not coming from where he expected. "Your grandmother," he said with a genuine smile, "the first in a long time, is the wisest woman I have ever heard of, and you are exactly like her." A new, secure, and personally verified car was brought by Harrison. Before getting in, Ethan made a promise, not just to Lena but to himself. "Listen," he said, gently holding her hands. "Your life and your grandmother's life changed today. I will ensure you have everything: the best education, the best home, security, but above all, I will ensure your voice is always heard, that you never have to whisper the truth in fear again." Lena's eyes shone. It wasn't the greed of someone receiving a promise of wealth, but the relief of someone finally finding a safe harbor. As the armored car carried him away from the scene of near death, Ethan couldn't stop thinking. His wealth, his companies, his contacts, it was all fragile. True strength, he understood, lay in the ability to see value where no one else was looking, to hear the truth, no matter how small or insignificant the voice that spoke it. That day, Ethan Vance was not saved by his money or his power. He was saved by the inheritance of wisdom passed from a grandmother to her granddaughter, by the courage of a young girl who refused to be invisible. And he knew, with a certainty that shook the foundations of his world, that his greatest debt was not on any of his company's balance sheets, but to that child a debt of gratitude he would spend the rest of his life honoring. The echo of that lesson would stay with him forever.